Okay, so hopefully we have everybody online now and our technical issues with sound have been resolved. Please do use the dial-in facility and we will run through the slide deck. So can we ensure we've got mute here as well? Okay.
ENA network.
Again,
has joined the meeting.
how we're going to run the webinar today. Thank you all for dialing in.
Has joined the
Apologies, we had
meeting.
some technical issues with the sound. Can we please ask you all to go on mute for voice so we don't have conflicting voices or background noise? We'll reset the clock at the moment. We have a chat facility on the WebEx. Thank you for everybody using that to let us know about our sound issues. Hopefully those are resolved now. If I can ask people to use the chat facility for questions and submit those to everybody. We have a moderator here who will collect those questions as we go through, and we will pause at the end of each section to reflect on those questions and answer those questions as we go. We have a section for intro, for wrap-up for each of the work streams. We'll take 10 minutes to do our commentary and then 5 minutes for questions on each section as we go. And then we will mop up any additional questions and open up Q&As at the end and when we're looking at what the consultation questions are. So we'll publish the presentation on the ENA Open Network's webpage.
Has joined the meeting.
And we will...
has joined the meeting.
Sorry, we've got more people joining.
Has joined the meeting.
We'll keep the structure to the webinar as we go. Apologies again for the technical problems to begin with. If people can please try and keep to mute, that will help us. Okay, so this webinar is to support our consultation on our 2018 work plan, which hopefully you will see published.
Okay, I'll do this.
So what we're trying to do today is recap on what we're trying to achieve, look at the work plan, and we have work stream or product leads from each of the areas set out in our work plan to talk through what we're going to be doing over the next year and to receive feedback, and also any early feedback on the questions that we've set out in our consultation paper. So we would like to discuss how stakeholders can get more involved. This is a substitute for the consultation process itself. It's supplementary. So please do provide us with the feedback that you can today, and then also please do follow up with formal consultation responses. The closing date for consultation response is 23rd of February, so hopefully there's plenty of time for you to listen to what we present today and reflect that in your consultation responses.
Okay, well, let me know what the outcome is from if there's anything strange.
Yeah, okay. Can people see the chat room? Can people please go to mute? Because people are finding it difficult to hear.
That's why I said I don't know whether we have them or not.
Is everyone in this room on mute? I can hear a bit of an echo up here. I think it's, Mike, I think it's going to be difficult for us to put a footer on the presentation as we run through, but I'll remind people as we go. Okay, great. Thank you, Andy.
And every time you ask
Hi, it's Fiona here. I'm just trying to look at how we can access the slide. Gillian Housing, Community Energy Scotland.
Has joined the meeting.
Okay, so the slides will be published on the ENA website after the webinar. Hopefully you can all get access to the slides as presented via the WebEx link that was sent out with the meeting invite. So I heard somebody ask about access to the slides. We will publish them afterwards, and hopefully people can see the slides. But I think the commentary that we give will give you colour around each of the work streams in the introduction. Okay? So just to recap on the objectives for the project for 2018, I'm not going to run through these bullet by bullet, but hopefully you have seen these as part of the PID that's set out in the consultation paper. The objectives are aligned with the work streams of work that we've got set up within the project, which I will run through in a bit more detail against the governance. But all of these objectives are cascaded down into objectives against each of the work streams, and that has driven the definition of the products that we've set out in the work plan. Again, I'm going to repeatedly say, please, for people to go to mute. There's someone typing in the background that we can hear on the soundtrack as well. So whoever that is typing now,
has joined the
if
meeting.
you can please go to mute, that'd be great. Okay, I can assure you it's not people typing in this room here. So please can just try and keep the audio to disruption to a minimum.
Yeah, same there as well. But it's probably not illegal.
So if we move to the next slide around
formally illegal, but at least some are welcome and visit you.
So there's a timeline across the bottom here that looks at the medium to long term as well as the short term for what the project is seeking to achieve. What we've done in establishing our project is we have been setting out programs of work on a year-by-year basis. So last year we had a program of work for 2017 that we reported on and published in our Opening Markets for Flexibility report at the end of the year. And this year we've set out our work plan for 2018. Now, just because we're setting out those programs of work on an annual basis doesn't mean that we're looking at this as a short-term project. There are long-term objectives that are set out in our PID and also in some of the products that we've set out with the DSO roadmap that show how we intend to take forward DSO transition and some of the whole system thinking on a long to medium term basis. So because we're packaging up the work into annual work packages doesn't mean we're not taking a long-term view. And two of the key drivers that we're looking at that are closely aligned with the BEIS and Ofgem Smart Systems and Flexibility Plan are enabling markets from flexibility and particularly the DSO transition workstream 3 that we'll talk about a bit later, and extending transmission and distribution coordination, some of the whole system thinking that we're embedding through the whole program. And in phase 2 in 2018, we have a significant ramp up in our activity in the project. So
has left the meeting.
Project team, both centrally at ENA and out in the network operators now, also with the input from stakeholders, is roughly doubling through this year. So it's a significant ramp up of work in this year, and we are looking to increase our stakeholder input and expand how we get input from all of you into the development work that we're undertaking. And there is a question in the consultation paper as to how you wish to participate and input into our development work. So hopefully that sets some context around the timelines, objectives, and the broad scope of what we're looking at. The next slide looks at our governance, our workstream structure, where we fit in, how we are governed, and also where we are getting input in from external stakeholders. So we have a steering group within the ENA that drives the scope and seeks to deliver against the work plan that we set out at the beginning of the year. That is the Open Networks Project Steering Group. That includes representation across all of the ENA members and also with representation from Ofgem and BEIS to ensure consistency with direction with the smart systems flexibility, clean growth, industrial strategy, and some of the other policy directions from government and Ofgem. We do have budget and we do report up to the ENA board. So very importantly, we have business leaders buy-in into what we're doing under ENA. So this has CEO buy-in from the highest level. So that enables us to steer and manage the delivery of our project outcomes, and that is covered in the 5 work streams that sit underneath it. I'm not going to go into the detail of what sits in those work streams because that is what's covered under the slides that are to follow. But what I will focus on is the advisory group that we have defined in here. So we have an advisory group of now over 40 stakeholders where we look to get input into all of our development work as we take it through the year's worth of development activities. And that is very much a two-way arrow, and it is very much a development input forum. It is not a dissemination group. So we are looking to our participants in the advisory group to review and provide input into the work that we're developing. As a consequence, this isn't a big sort of 200-person dissemination group. We use roundtables and workshops in order to get people's views and stakeholder input into what we're doing. So we have used trade associations traditionally in that group so that we can get out to a wider group of people through representation in stakeholder groups. And we publish the members of that advisory group on the ENA website. What we are doing more, and you'll see it under the communications workstream later, is we are incorporating more stakeholder feedback as part of the 2018 workstream. In the customer experience workstream, we'll be using customer groups to provide input into some of the work we're doing there. We are scheduling dissemination events, particularly around one of our big consultations in June, July, where we're looking to publish our DSO models out of workstream 3, which again, one of my colleagues will talk a little more about later. So all of our outputs from the project are published on the ENA website, so we're trying to be as transparent and open as possible about the work that we're developing here. So again, please do provide input back into the consultation on how you believe that your input can be taken into account in the group. Okay. So are there any more questions? Most of the chat that's coming in through the chat board at the moment is around our technical issues with sound. Our administrators here are trying to mute people as they come in and through our control panel here. Kate, I know that you've put a post up there saying that you've lost sound, but hopefully Andy is in conversation with you as well to try and restore that. So are there any questions around
So Jason, we haven't had any questions on the introductory bit. So unless anything comes through immediately, I think we move on to the next part of the presentation, which is
workstream 1. Okay. If there are any other more general questions around the introduction or context, then please come back to it and we'll cover that at the final Q&A session at the end.
Good morning, everyone. So my name is Matt White. I'm the Lead Power System Development Engineer for UK Power Networks Smart Grid team. I'm one of the product leads on Workstream 1.
Has left the meeting.
So for those familiar with the project, Workstream 1 this year is a continuation of what we started last year, which was an evaluation of the transmission and distribution processes with a view to further developing those and implementing whole system approaches. So the work in phase 2 is really a byproduct of that work that was done last year. So the gap analysis work that was done in products 2 on the investment and operational processes, and the continuation of some of the work that was done through the other products, so the commercial principles, the operational interfaces work. We have 4 key objectives that have sort of helped mould the work for this year, and that is enabling greater access for DER to both networks and services, and you'll see as I run through the product shortly where that's reflected through publication of regional service requirements, AM information, etc. The second objective is really around whole system investment planning, and I'll speak a little bit of that as I run through the products. That's one of our key products this year to continue that work that we kicked off and we presented to the advisory group at the end of last year. The third objective is to provide information to customers, better information to customers than we currently do, again reflected through the products, A&M information, a system-wide resource register, really to give that visibility and clarity to customers when looking to connect to the network or looking for opportunities for providing services to the networks. And obviously, key amongst all of this new world of flexibility and whole system approaches is to ensure continued network reliability, to make sure we keep the lights on and we comply with security standards, and help those security standards to evolve to allow us to take these more efficient whole system approaches. So just running through the products, you can see there are 13 products this year in Workstream 1. It's worth mentioning that that is a consolidated view of what were, I think, 22 products to start with. So what we tried to do with these, taking the feedback that we've had from you guys through advisory groups, through other responses, to really hone in on the areas that you guys want to see us tackle this year. So I hope we've got it right. This is obviously an opportunity to tell us whether we have or not.
Left the meeting.
So I won't run through each one verbatim because I'm sure you've got the consultations information there. But I'll just give you a flavour, if you like, for each one of those products. So the investment processes one, as I said, this really picks up from the work last year where we started to develop a short-term approach to investment planning and on a whole systems basis. This was really taking and will take the existing NOAA process that National Grid run and look at how we can get distribution network solutions to provide options to transmission constructors. So we'll be working through that this year. We're identifying case studies. You may have seen in the latest publication from Product 3 last year that we talked about
has left the meeting.
4 different case studies. We've since had a more detailed scoping meeting, and we're looking at honing those in and providing some feedback around about the end of March, April as to what those case studies will look like. And what we want to do with those case studies is make them as broad as possible so that we can test as many of the new processes, data exchanges, models that we'll need to do to really inform how this process then goes forward to accommodate more market-based approaches. The next product, the DER services procurement, this is a piece of work that, well, as we develop those whole system approaches around investment planning, will give customers the opportunity then, once we've facilitated those business processes, those systems, to be able to provide services into both the distribution and transmission networks. So it's a fair chunk of work to be done there in establishing what that procurement process will look like, how we can create efficiencies within that procurement process across transmission and distribution. So I mentioned about reliability. You'll see there under Product 4, reliability standards and emergency requirements. That's really about making sure the lights stay on with all this work that we're doing, taking into account the EU code changes that are coming through, the changes that are currently underway through security standards such as P2 and SQSS, and informing those standards and making sure they're adaptive to the work that we're doing through open networks. The next one, the whole system FES, that really ties into the investment processes. So what we've identified here is that whilst there is a future energy scenarios on a global scale, if you like, for GB run by National Grid, getting into the detail at a regional level provides additional benefits, and some work has been kicked off through various DNOs. We'll be looking to build on that this year, such that we can create a baseline, if you like, for more regional style FESs that will then help become the building blocks really for that national FES. The next product, the ENA information and system-wide resource register. So they're really about that, as I touched on earlier, giving you guys that visibility that you need of what's out there, what's connected. This will be evolving heat maps that DNOs are currently using, evolving those potentially up to the transmission level, creating new layers within those heat maps, and also linking with the work that's being done under the customer work stream. So that'd be work stream 2, which obviously I'll let the work stream 2 leads talk more about. So I'll talk about 9 and 12 together really, the TSO, DSO transmission impacts and data requirements. So, as you're well aware, there's been a significant amount of work going on to refine the statement of works process. That started a couple of years even before this project, and has really been expedited through the work done last year. So these two products will be looking at getting the code modifications through to cement what was produced last year, and you will see a rollout program published on the website for areas that will be tackled by National Grid and the relevant DNOs.
Has left the meeting.
Planning limit style information, which will hopefully tackle the time lag sometimes in getting connected to areas. And it will also look at how we incorporate those new data exchanges and the process that we've developed through that revised statement of works, how we adapt those and maybe consider the week 28 and the week 42 that DNOs and National Grid currently undertake, so maybe making those more fluid, regular updates and sort of revising those processes. The final product there that we've got, the operational data and control architecture. Product 5 and 6 last year kicked off this work to look at the key interface points between the transmission and distribution network operators. There are a number of models that tie in also with the work that was done under product 4, the commercial principles. So this year we'll be looking forward to taking those models to implement trials where we can, around 2 or 3 of those models. So obviously looking at the joint procurement model, and then the DSO, the full sort of DSO style model and the full sort of TSO style model, trialling those where we can on a real-time basis. So I know that was a bit of a whistle-stop tour through those products. There are a fair number. There's a lot more detail in the PID, which you guys can go through, and I encourage you to feed back on that detail, as Jason said earlier, as part of the consultation process. So that's it really from me. Any questions? I'll be more than willing to try and answer.
So we have no questions on the chat page at the moment. Does anybody want to put a quick question to Matt, just while we're on workstream 1? No? Okay, let's move it on then to workstream 2.
Hi, hello, good morning everybody. My name is Chris Allenson, Northern Power Grid. I'm standing in for Matt Dry, who heads up workstream 2 on customer experience. It does what it says on the tin really. The whole idea is to improve information for customers to support initial network connection and then engagement on future service provision. The benefits that we're hoping to provide to customers is enhanced information on connections and services, more consistent customer experience, irrespective of which network operator a customer will be engaging with, best practice or better practice across network operators, and improved use of capacity. I'd point out that some of this work that we do will be kind of work stream led and kept within the work group and then shared with stakeholders, including the DER connection steering group, but some of it will lead through products created, for example, in workstream 1. So there'll be stuff that we do and launch ourselves, and there will be stuff that comes out of workstream 1, for example, products 10 and 11 on facilitating connections, that we will try to put a kind of customer-facing public face onto. So just spinning down the 8 products that we've got planned for 2018, good practice ahead of connection applications. Distributors already provided information to help customers before they apply for a connection, including things like heat maps and information on websites and options for approaching the process. We want to do some work on management of capacity. The DNOs have done something already in terms of creating rules for making sure that we're using capacity in the best way, things like dealing with matters such as, if you like, stagnated capacity or sterilised capacity. Some more work on terms and definitions. We're getting quite a bit of feedback that customers are not facing common terminology when they're engaging with distributors. So things like firm and unfirm connections mean different things at transmission and distribution, and may even mean different things between distributors. So we need to do some more work on that, at least a glossary. We started some work. There's a document that we presented to the advisory group on things like firm and unfirm, just to try and describe different types of connection, just not to establish a common language now, but at least a common understanding of where there's differences. As we move through, we want to create more information on flexibility services, and also good practice following connection applications. I expect a close link with the DER connection steering group on at least number 5 and number 1. Number 6, guidance on post-connection changes, so that if somebody is already connected and they want to make changes, a revision to capacity, for example, or a future revision to service provision, we want to deal with that within that product. We've picked up on lots of stakeholder feedback on provision of constraint information, and I do know that DNOs have provided updates yesterday to the DER connection steering group. I'm happy to take questions either through this format or separately via the ENA, if somebody wants to ask about the work that's been going on in the DER connection steering group, and via the joint chairs of that. And then really just updating the stuff that we've done already in 2017 to pick up on things like advisory group feedback. That was a whistle-stop tour. I would stress the fact that a lot of the dependencies are what takes place in other work streams, and so as the stuff comes out of the other work streams, we're going to be working together with those work streams and work stream leads to package these up into customer-facing products. And that is it from me for work stream 2. Unfortunately, you get to hear my voice again when we get to work stream 4.
I think maybe the thing I'd add to that, Chris, is that in scoping up the products we have for Workstream 2, I mean, Matt referenced it in Workstream 1 as well, we were very much driven by the input from the advisory group and spent quite a lot of time with stakeholder colleagues in specifying the priorities and the scope of what we were doing. So that's, you know, obviously we are seeking feedback from all of you, but we've hopefully been listening to stakeholders as part of our scoping work.
Okay, thanks, Chris. We have a couple of questions coming through here. So first of all, really on the getting more consistent or similar customer experience, we're getting a question as to whether that's across both transmission and distribution, or is it some subset of that?
The aim would be both.
Okay, and we've got a further question or comment, which is that we value consistent high standards for pre-connection information, such as heat maps. Could we or would we be picking up a minimum quality level for information provided in the sort of work that we're doing here?
We will take that as feedback. I think one of the issues that we've had with different companies' heat maps is largely technology driven, and where they're picking up the data from, and what network monitoring tools they've got for data and planning tools. So you would want as much consistency as possible, but you end up with the age-old problem of different company groups having picked different IT routes.
And I think as part of product 1 in the good practice ahead of connection applications, one of the first pieces of work to be done under that is interviews and analysis of the current practice across all the DNOs. Yeah. So we will get insight into the information that's being exchanged and look at what good practice and consistency we can provide out on that.
I think it's worth saying as well that minimum standard is an appropriate word, but that isn't to say that we should drive all the DNOs to the lowest common denominator. So some may have the opportunity to work at a higher level, but minimum is probably right rather than mandated level. So.
Absolutely. I would just add to that that I think lots of parties, including the industry regulator, expect distribution companies to compete with each other in an innovation type sphere. So if somebody can do something better, somebody will do something better.
For a better customer experience.
Yeah.
Okay, and one other question, which we may be able to pick up actually under work stream 5. It's about, do we envisage events with some wider participation to disseminate some of the outputs that will come through work stream 1 and work stream 2, and I guess the other work streams as well. So I think we'll pick that up under work stream 5.
Yeah, we'll pick it up later. I'll just sort of give a general answer back on that, though. The answer to it is yes, we do envisage an event, and we are conscious that this year we didn't do a big show and tell dissemination event. We did a presentation of our report at the LCNI conference at the end of the year, and that was demonstrating what we'd delivered during the year, the momentum that we'd built up, some of the products, as well as an early view on what we were setting out for next year. The plan at the moment is, as I said earlier, a dissemination event around the sort of June, July time to align with the consultation out on the DSO models that Stuart is about to talk through under work stream 3. And then I think a dissemination event towards the end of the year where LCNI is earlier in the year this year. So I think scheduling a dissemination event towards the end of the year for other work streams and for further progress is definitely what we'll be looking at doing.
And one last one here, which definitely does fall with Chris. Could you just clarify, Chris, who the DER Connection Steering Group are and how they fit alongside this project?
It is the renamed DG Connection Steering Group, and it's jointly chaired by Graham Fennell of RES and Brian Hoy of Electricity Northwest.
Okay. And it's not actually I'll just clarify, it's not actually part and parcel of the Open Networks project, but it is another group, another ENA group that we're working very closely with.
Yeah, and it's a way of getting stakeholder feedback, because the customer representatives on that steering group are representatives of wider stakeholders, for example, storage providers, DG more generally, solar, community energy, absolutely, consumer input. So it's another route to get feedback into the products in addition to the advisory group.
What might be useful actually, thinking about it, is for us to that governance and workstream structure slide is one that we've had right from the beginning, and maybe it'd be better to expand that and show how the DER's Connections Group fits into that, and also probably worth adding in the Charging Futures Forum that relates into Workstream 4 as well. So I think we'll take that on board and have a look at how we might revamp that governance structure to cover some of the additional groups that we are feeding in and out of at the moment.
Okay, thanks guys. So we can move on then to Workstream 3.
Yeah, okay, thank you. I'm Stuart Reid. I'm Head of DSO and Innovation for Scottish and Southern Electricity Networks, and I'm leading on the Workstream 3 work. So you see in the slide, the first thing I want to say is that the work that we've done to date is really kind of dependent on really good engagement with the advisory group and those that came along to the modelling workshops. And I have to say they've been successful from my perspective, because everyone has participated in that kind of putting the biases to the side and all the rest of it, and everyone's kind of got in and mucked in, and that's helped us. So we've actually got some good stuff coming out of the initial work that we did last year. So this year is about kind of now starting to kind of bed that in, take the feedback that we've had from the first iteration, and you'll see that in some of the products there as well. Breaking down this, if you like, very large...
Rachel has joined the meeting.
And actually breaking that down to the least regrets and the no regrets investments that we can make as businesses, and the fact that all of us can make into enabling the DSO work to happen. It's about moving on to actually start to look at the cost-benefit analysis of the different models, so we can start to inform the decisions that we made further down the line in terms of the direction of travel. And it's about doing that work in such a way that we can actually truly articulate the benefits, the pros and cons of each of the models as we go through the work. So you'll see on the document on the right-hand side, we've broken down that kind of paragraph I've just given there into a number of specific products, yeah? So the first product there, that is focused on basically finishing what we've started. That's about consolidating the work on the initial 3 market models and disseminating that. We've been working with EETL that are doing the modelling work on us to make sure that that dissemination is in a fit-for-purpose form, so that it's providing information that people need to see rather than that there's lots of clutter that actually detracts from the actual true modelling work that's being done. So that's product 1, and that's ongoing. Product 2 is the further SGAM modelling. That's expanding on the work we've done already. And so, for example, the TSO leads model will be added into there. The hub concept will be added in, and that will give us that breadth of models that we need to make a true analysis of the options further down the line. Okay. Now, the third piece is identifying the market agnostic pieces. So these are the bits that aren't dependent on the market decision that's made between the different models. Identifying the common elements across the models, and actually starting to put some thinking behind, what can we do to bring these particular elements forward and start to get some early gains in terms of the transition to DSO. And so that identifying these market agnostic elements, the DSO functions and the no regrets piece, that's what this the number 3 product is focusing on. Now, obviously, with all this, a key piece is that these models actually stack up. We're not doing this to push a particular agenda. This is about sitting down collaboratively across the whole group, stakeholder group, and actually come up with models. So we felt there was a need to make sure that there was a bit of independent review carried out of the work that we've done, and also independent work in terms of the CBA that we do. So you'll see product 4 there is focusing on that independent review and commissioning an organisation to come in and actually pick up that piece of work for us. That will develop the draft CBA that will inform the decisions that need to be made further down the line. So that's going to be quite a big piece of work. One of the big considerations for us with that one is within the group there's a concern that we have a little kind of islanded CBA that stands on its own and doesn't take consideration of the work beyond here. So, for example, the work in the CFF. So there's a bit of a discussion to be had about how we actually come up with a CBA process that's fit for purpose, and also isn't so narrow that it only looks at, for example, network benefits. It's got to look at the broader societal benefits of the whole DSO transition. So we're actually working with all the chess pieces rather than just a few. So there's a lot of work to be done on that particular element. So product 5 is the DSO model validation, and that includes the consultation process. So that's fairly self-explanatory. And then product 6 is drawing out these key enablers to identify the key bits that we need to actually allow this to actually transition into business as usual. We start to look at things like timelines and the dependencies and what implementation strategies might look like for the different models, so we can assess the impact of each of the models and how they'd actually become a reality. Now, product 7, and there's a bit of overlap between the different groups because I think all the work streams will have a need for this. So this is about the elements where there is uncertainty and concepts need to be proven, and we need to learn the lessons to identify unintended consequences and all the rest of it. A big piece here is going to be identifying further trials to address the gaps in the functionality. So a piece there in product 7, and then finally product 8 is pulling that all together to provide the options, the pros and cons, the costs, the benefits, the implementation plans, and all that for the different models, so that the decisions can be made about which particular direction we take as a country in relation to DSO. So that I think sums it up in terms of workstream 3. Thanks.
Okay. Let's just pick up on a couple of questions, one of which I think has been picked up on the chat, but maybe Stuart, you referred to SCAM or SGAM. Maybe just tell us exactly what that is.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, it's a smart grid architectural model. And it's simply a methodology for mapping out all the relationships between the different players in a DSO world, so you can understand what information needs to be transferred, who has what responsibilities. Without that, we can't work out what are sort of systems, processes, business structures, relationships, informational beats, all that sort of stuff. So it's simply a way of analysing a complex system, capturing that in a way that can be communicated. It came from a European initiative to identify a standard for mapping things like smart grid architectures, and we decided over a year ago now that was the route we were going to take to actually to map out what we're trying to do here.
That's brilliant. Thanks to ENA, who's just sent around a link for that. Just on another question, so it's a good question around data really, and the fact that some of the success, some of the efficiencies that we're going to get out of DSO will rely on much better data being available on where constraints arise on networks. So the question really is, will this data be available to drive these markets for constraint management, and will the Open Networks project be pushing for that, or how will it be pushing?
I think particularly the EDCM model is the question raised.
Yeah, I would say just the even day one analysis on what we need to do as a DSO would say yes, you have to have that visibility. And the stuff we talked about earlier on, it's probably an early iteration of it in terms of where we need to get to, but the heat maps that we talked about a minute ago, the evolution of the heat maps, I think they will evolve even further into structured data sets that people can access and analyse, and they'll drive the market. So absolutely, I think that's absolutely central to the whole piece, is that visibility.
I think there's two things to add to that. The EDCM is the charging methodology that established dual prices for large customers. That model is under governance under the CUSA, and there has recently been a tendering exercise to appoint a new model designer, so you might see the model presented differently in the future. It'll still remain under open governance, but there's also a link to Product 7 on Workstream 2, which is the provision of constraint information, and so yes, the answer is yes, it'll have to be available.
Yeah, and I think what you'll see as well is that it'll start to become temporal and locational. You'll have all these elements in there, so and that's the sort of stuff that's coming out of the analysis we're doing in the Workstream 3 and in the other products.
Yeah. Okay, and just one last bit to add into that, which is Workstream 1, which Matt talked about earlier. Product 6 there, which is about regional market developments, is very much in the place of making sure that the DNOs have a consistent and clear way to start to surface this sort of information. So we've got one further question or comment that's come through, which I'll just pitch Stuart's way, which is really just say a little bit more about the choice of how important it is to choose the consultants for the CBA. We'd like this process to consider the economics of the chosen design, and will it support efficient markets for DER flexibility? Yeah, and I think the answer is probably...
Well, yeah, in terms of supporting, that's the whole purpose of the DSO. If a DSO doesn't support flexibility, then it ain't a DSO in my book, So I think that's kind of fundamental. The choice, the CBA process, we've got a lot of thinking to do around this, but one of the key things would be if we end up with a CBA that simply focuses on inward-looking network-related benefits, I think we'll struggle to get a CBA that stacks up here. This has got to be a CBA that looks beyond that, so looking to generation constraints, transmission, distribution, the whole gambit in terms of the whole system, but beyond that as well into the sort of things it enables in terms of the heat markets, the efficiency in industry, all sorts of different things there, so we can actually see the whole value of DSO rather than just that little snippet. So getting the right organisation there to do that, and it might be multiple. It might be that we blend together elements from different pieces of work that have been done that could do with updating and merge to actually create a single view of what that CBA. I don't think there's any great benefit in having different exercises done in different places. So I think that there's a discussion to be had, I think, with Ofgem and BEIS about how that links with CFF work, and that's where we intend to take it next. So the importance of that is not lost on us by a long shot.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, thanks everyone for the questions so far. Just to remind you, there will be a bit of time at the end. We've allowed for a bit of time at the end for further questions. So if you do think of further stuff on workstream 1, 2, or 3, by all means, pitch it in. But we'll move on to workstream 4.
Hi, Chris Allenson again. On behalf of Paul McGimsey, who leads on workstream 4, it is worth highlighting that workstream 4 started off by doing some work, among other things, on the differences in charging arrangements between transmission and distribution, and published some work on that. However, at the back end of 2017 and now going into 2018, when Ofgem launched its reform of electricity network access and forward-looking charges and its working paper, and launched two task forces, one on access and one on the forward-looking charges, the workstream 4 umbrella is now really about managing that task force activity at the moment. It's all against very tight timescales so that Ofgem can publish a paper via Charging Futures coming up to start of summer, as I understand it. I'll just pick an extract that's not on the slides. I picked an extract out of Ofgem's working paper, and this is a quote from their paper. It says, "We are focusing this project on options to define more explicitly arrangements for access to networks and to improve forward-looking elements of network charging. By forward-looking, we mean the element of network charges that looks to provide signals to users about how their behaviours can increase or reduce future costs on the network." So, in that context, the task forces are working on all those elements of charging and access that influence or would be managed by future customer behaviours to send the right cost signals, whether they be time of year, time of day, half-hourly blocks. So, for anybody who wants to know more about that, there is the Charging Futures website, and there was obviously links on Ofgem's paper, links to Ofgem's paper on their website. So back to the slides. So now workstream 4 is largely about supporting Ofgem's Charging Futures Forum, again linking back to their reform project, and to support the charging delivery body, which will do the translation into manageable actions. We're also providing support on charging to the wider Open Networks project, developing recommendations to remove inefficient signals in charging and any inappropriate remuneration. Workstream 4 have already contributed on the delivery of the first options from the Charging Futures Forum, so it's in 3 phases, the task force work, and phase 1 was to produce an options paper. Phase 2 will be to do more analysis on the options that are in that paper, and then phase 3 will be a final report that would go to Ofgem and the Charging Futures Forum, and then I think Ofgem will decide which aspects it wants to see taken forward and produce a paper. So it's quite intense all the way through quarter 1 and quarter 2. And if anybody wants to know more about the timeline, that stuff is available on the Charging Futures website.
Andy's just posted a link to that on the chat room as well.
And if you want to get really involved in it, the second Charging Futures Forum is being held in London on the 28th of February. Details are on the website.
So the mechanics are, there's separate task force work for access and forward-looking charges, and then there are joint task force meetings to try and link those things together where they link, and then that will feed up to the Charging Futures Forum, and then the delivery body's separate.
And I think it's probably worth highlighting at this point maybe some of the key dependencies between the work streams as well. So one of the functions in DSO is charging. We've been working on the basis of the existing charging regime and designing and defining what the different market models might look like for DSO. at the point where we have a better picture on what the future arrangements for charging will look like, we can then reflect that in the charging function in workstream 3 in the DSO definition. So there are a number of key dependencies between the different work streams, and this is a good example of how output from other work streams will better inform the development work in others as well.
And that's it from me. Subject to questions.
Okay, Chris. One point, maybe just to make sure, could you say a little bit about vulnerable customers and how we're taking them into account in some of the charging work?
It looks like the next piece of work we've got is to look at domestic customers separately, including vulnerable ones, obviously. What we don't want is inappropriate outcomes. Now, there's going to be a balance to be struck between cost-reflective charging and whatever social policies Ofgem Bays want to bring in under that dimension. I think we, as task force members, we would be looked to produce economic forward-looking signals, and then we have an industry regulator that obviously protects the needs of customers as well as being an economic regulator. And there are consumer representatives on the task forces, and one assumes as well that we'll need to make sure there's sufficient consumer representation on the Charging Futures Forum to make sure that pure mathematics doesn't run away with itself, if that's the right word.
Okay, thank you. So no more questions at this point, so we'll move on to workstream 5.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, and yes, it's Jason Brogden, also leading the commentary around the workstream 5, which is being led by a group of communications leads across the DNOs and the DOs and SO. So workstream 5 on communications is ramping up significantly in 2018, and there will be a much greater emphasis on stakeholder engagement and stakeholder events through this year. We've got a hit list in here of events that we're planning to do. The key thing for us is making sure that we're aligning some of these key events and aligning some of our activities with when our key products become available out of the project. So as I've highlighted earlier, we are intending to do dissemination events, and we will align those with where we've got key outcomes from the project and try to get those into people's diaries as early as possible. So the first key public dissemination event is likely to be in June, July, when we consult on the market models for DSO, and then in the future we will look to do an update further down the line on the remainder of the progress through the rest of the year. We do have a newsletter that is going out on a regular basis at the moment. Sorry, Andy. Yeah. And if you would like to be added to our stakeholder distribution list to receive any updates or the newsletter, then please do email the Open Networks at energynetworks.org. That is where we keep a register of all of our stakeholder distribution lists. And if you're on that hit list, then you'll get our newsletters, invites to the WebEx, and anything else that we might set up for this year. So I think that what we're seeking to do is reach out much more proactively this year, and we have more resource and more effort dedicated to ensuring that everybody knows what we're doing under Open Networks, understands what our objectives and our outcomes are, but most importantly has the opportunity to input into that as part of our development process as well. We are trying to be as open and transparent as possible about what we're doing under Open Networks. So as part of our development work, we'll continue to review our development work, our products, through collaborative development with the advisory group. We will consult more widely on some of our key products. So we have a plan which I'll run through in the next slide on when we're going to go for public consultation on those key products. And as Chris highlighted earlier, we are going to be using the DR Connections group and other customer groups to ensure that we're getting wider input into particularly those products that impact customers. And thank you to Graham for posting the link to the DR Connections group and just emphasising some of the objectives of that group on the chat line earlier. So the key messages, I think, is around, hopefully, we will continue to be perceived as being open and transparent what we're doing. We will be publishing everything that comes out of the project on our website.
Has joined the meeting.
And we'll be seeking
A participant
to continue
has left the meeting.
that engagement with all stakeholders. So just to show where our planned consultations are through 2018, when we looked at our work plan, we spoke to the advisory group. They said it'd be really helpful if you gave us a forward plan on when the consultations would be, so that we could plan them in and so that we could ensure that we have resources ready. So that's what we've done. So there is a table in the PID that shows when we'll be coming out for consultation for which products from which work stream. And that is translated into this rather nicer picture than the table that sits in the PID. The other thing that advisory group members asked us to do was try and spread the consultations through the year. So again, that's what we've done here. We have tried to spread those consultations across a sort of quarterly basis or a 2-monthly basis to make sure that we're not just dumping a whole load of consultations at one time over the summer or Christmas holidays. So we are looking to spread that to ensure that we get the maximum feedback from you. And the first step in that today is our phase 2 work plan and prioritisation. And then we're going to be looking at the good practice for flexible connections, which Chris talked about earlier, the DSO modelling. So I won't go through this sort of comment by comment, but you'll see where these key consultations come out. And I expect that we will run similar webinars to this one to support people's feedback into all of those consultation documents. So again,
has joined the meeting.
People asked us to set up these webinars, these WebExes, during consultation periods, so that people have the chance to ask questions and get further insight before the written deadline for consultation responses. And I think all of this feeds into the more general consultation question 6 about how you'd like to provide input into the Open Network project and also be kept informed of development. So we want to make sure that we've got these key staging posts through our development and that we're taking into account the input from stakeholders. So I think that's broadly what I wanted to cover under workstream 5. And I expect, I was going to say I hope, I don't hope, I expect that you will all see the impact and the effects of our increased stakeholder engagement over the next 12 months and beyond.
Okay, thanks, Jason. No further questions at this stage. There will be obviously opportunity, plenty of time to ask questions, so please do. I think it's probably back to Jason for the next part, which I think is just to talk through the consultation questions themselves.
Thanks, John. Yes, and this is sort of the concluding element of the content of the consultation and the PID. And again, we'll have the opportunity to wrap this up at the end with more general questions. So, as John said, and as Andy put on the chat line later, obviously we have the open questions through the chat to send to everyone. But if people would like to send direct messages to John West, then please do that if you don't want to, if there's sensitivity around the source of any of our questions. So as I run through this, if you can think of any further questions you might want to ask, because we're close to the end here, and I want to make sure that you're given the maximum opportunity to feed questions into us. Okay. So this is the crux of our consultation, are the 6 questions that are set out in this slide and that you will have seen in the consultation document. And the intent of this really is to make sure that all of you have the opportunity to highlight to us where you think that we should be concentrating our efforts, where you think that we might be focusing on areas that are of less importance than others, where you think we might have missed things, where you think that some of the items that we've got out for timescales for delivery are inappropriate, whether we should be doing things faster, whether we should be doing things slower or later. So we have encapsulated all of that into those 5 questions, and it would really help us in terms of analysing responses if people responded back to the questions rather than more generic points around in sort of more free text letters. So we have sectioned those into the 6 direct questions, and it would be great if you could provide your responses back against these 5 questions. The 6th question, again, as we highlighted in Workstream 5, is a more general question on how to provide input into the Open Network project and how to keep informed of developments. And those are 2 different aspects. So the advisory group is really important for us in us being able to workshop and collaboratively develop our products. So it is really important for us that they remain as workshops and that we can have that round table type feedback from stakeholders. But we really would like to hear how people think we might improve the advisory group or how we might be able to get feedback in alternative ways. Again, we've got those additional public consultations through the rest of this year. And then again, how can we best keep stakeholders informed of developments? Again, with our a distribution list that we're maintaining here, please do email in contacts for that distribution list. For people who are representing trade associations, if people want to receive things directly, please encourage your trade association members to send emails into Open Networks so that we can add them onto the distribution list. We are trying to let people know when we've got products published. That we are very aware that there is a vast swathe of information and products now published on the ENA website. So the more we can drip feed those out with our communications as and when we publish them, the less scary it is when people first look at the website. So again, you know, we're trying to be as transparent and open as possible with what we're doing here, and anything that can help us disseminate out information to stakeholders is great for us. And we are using the ENA member distribution list to try and get out to stakeholders as well. For example, the power responsive stakeholder list at National Grid and the stakeholder list at the individual DNOs for some of their communications and ICE plans. So the other item that we have on the ENA website is we do have a set of frequently asked questions. Again, that sits on the Open Networks website. So please do go to those and share those with colleagues, because it gives a very broad brush overview on some of the key questions that we get asked and some of the responses that we can give. So hopefully the consultation questions are going to tease out your feedback and views back on what we've set out for this year and how you might input.
Has left the meeting.
So I think at this point, this is where we had left a good bulk of time for any questions or any feedback on the consultation questions, and to give people the opportunity to have thought through what we've briefed on each of the individual work streams, maybe think about some of the dependencies between them, and generally reflect on any questions you might want to ask the experts and the leads we have around the table here today, in order to inform and help you in any formal response to our consultation paper. I see, Graham, thank you for your support of the proposal to update the governance diagram. we will seek to incorporate that into a response back to any consultation responses. But we'll have a look at that and get that onto the ENA website and incorporate into our thinking. So open up to anyone else to provide any more Q&As on the chat room. I think we'll leave this open for a few minutes to allow people to type and submit in. I think if we don't see anything on the website, I think we can probably lift the mute, and if people want to raise questions by
left
voice,
the meeting.
Then we can go ahead and do that too. Can we lift the mute centrally?
They can do that themselves.
Okay. So if people would like to raise verbal questions and lift your mute on us, then please do. Or add any observations or comments.
Has left the meeting.
Okay, we have a question coming through, or a question comment coming through. So most industry stakeholders will be signed up to Ofgem alerts. Could open network project updates be notified on there as well to reach the widest possible audience, which is a good observation.
Has left the meeting.
The support from Ofgem would be useful. Anything there, Jason?
Yeah, I think we'll raise that with Ofgem. I think that's a really good suggestion. And you know, like everyone around this table and probably on the call, I get the daily Ofgem updates. So yes.
Despite Mr. Kerr's,
I agree, Mike. But I think all we can do is ask. Yeah. I think that, you know, we should capture that our stakeholders will ask for that through this webinar and see whether they will take that on board. Okay. Yeah. I don't think we've explicitly asked, Mike, but we will do so. Anybody else?
Has joined the meeting.
Okay, here's a question really. Recharging or on charging, how open are Ofgem to the TOU or charging discussion? If the DSO requires time of use costing to influence behaviour, then supply tariffs and contracts should mirror the structure for all business and residential customers. So anything, Chris, to say on that? How open are Ofgem to time of use charging?
Ofgem have been very clear that time of use, temporal signals are most definitely on the table. I completely take the point that if duos tariffs became really, became fancier in terms of time of use to get signals about peak demand and kind of defer reinforcement, I take the point completely that unless they're reflected in end user tariffs to customers, then they might not have the effect they should have. There's an economic theory that says if you're passing the cost messages through to the suppliers, eventually the suppliers will find a way of responding to those time signals. But yeah, I am aware that there'll be probably still contracts out there that are 24/7 single rate contracts, and I guess if you're a big enough customer, that's the contract you will secure from a supplier. So yeah, I take the point, and I think Ofgem, at the end of this, wouldn't it be a shame if people did lots of fancy changes to billing systems for them not to actually be reflected in end user tariffs? But then I am reminded by supply colleagues that is a matter for competition as the suppliers compete with each other, and they will deliver to customers the products that they want. So we might not have that much control over that.
It's also what the customer wants sometimes as well.
Sorry?
It's also what the customer wants. Sometimes they want simplified tariffs to understand it.
Absolutely. That is what I said at the end, that suppliers will provide what the customers are wanting.
Okay,
over to Andy. I think there's a question.
Yeah, we've had a private question come through. Really good question. Is there potential to democratise the advisory group further and provide funding support for smaller
potentially more rural groups to attend roundtable discussions, e.g. some of those from more far-flung regions of the Highlands and Islands where travel costs can be prohibitive?
So I think we'll just have to have a look at that. Andy, to be honest, last year we did do one of our advisory groups up in Glasgow, up in Scotland, to try and get out for locations. I think if I'm going to be honest, I think it's going to be difficult from a funding perspective because you'd have to pick who. We have to pick who we might fund and under what circumstances and how much budget we release. So without wanting to sound defensive and obstructive, I think that will, in practice, be a very difficult thing to do. What we do have in the advisory group is we have representatives from both Community Energy Scotland and Community Energy England, and both of those are represented on the DER connections group as well. Yeah. So I think for that particular person who's raised the question, happy to pick that up via the Open Networks email address and have a discussion on how we might facilitate them better feeding into those discussions.
Has left the meeting.
It's going to be difficult from a funding perspective.
I think the other angle on that is the local DNO will also have stake, and certainly from an SSEN perspective, we are adding in DSO related stuff into our local stakeholder engagement discussions. So it's another route in, another way of hearing about what's happening in the project. So we can probably make that available to just drop the details.
Yeah, and I think
Has left the meeting.
Point is very good. If there's things that individual network companies or maybe even other organisations have done that work for certain stakeholder groups, we'd be really interested in hearing. Because obviously we can talk about what we've all done in the past with different communities, but we're really interested in things that work for stakeholders, so if people can sort of bring forward ideas of what's been good engagement with some of these more regional groups or other groups that find it difficult to get involved, please let us know so we can look at taking them on board.
Yeah, I agree.
I would be surprised if there were any DNOs that were not planning DSO engagement sessions to enable customers to engage more locally.
Yeah.
I think that DSO and Open Networks is a key element of the stakeholder engagement piece out there anyway for all DNOs and also for National Grid as well. Okay, so hopefully we've answered as much of that as we can to that question. But again, please do make contact through the Open Networks email address and we can have a further conversation on that.
Okay, no more questions at the moment. Do you just want to say a couple of things about next steps, Jason, and we'll...
Yep. So this is the final slide for the webinar today, is the next steps. Our consultation closes on the 23rd
Has left
of February.
The meeting.
And our consultation document and PID are available at the link that is on that slide here. Hopefully you will all have seen that in advance of coming onto the webinar. And that sets out the more detailed plan and a bit more context and everything else around the consultation paper. All I can really do on this webinar is please just encourage you to send your feedback in. Please send your responses into the email address that's set out, and we will use those responses to further shape our work plan. It's not stopping us getting on with work. We are getting on with it on the basis of the body of work that's set out, but we will adapt, and it's been very clear through the steering group and through the board that we do need to be adaptable in our body of work. The picture we have now for DSO transition is different from the picture that we had when we set off last year. So we are learning by doing as we go, and you can help us providing feedback in through all of our consultations.
Okay. So we've got a comment really coming through, which we'll just pick up. So there's a number of aspects not necessarily linked to the supply of customers. There's concerns really coming through about conflict of interest between a supplier and consumer. Is the supplier the most appropriate intermediary for much of this flexibility work? Is there scope for other intermediaries, as it will likely end up to be too complex for the typical end user?
So I think this probably feeds into our key objectives for the opening markets for flexibility. And what we are trying to do is act as, and the three buzzwords you'll see come through on DSO a lot is neutral market facilitator. What we're seeking to do is provide that platform with a level playing field for all providers of flexibility services out there. And what that should do is it should also facilitate the market for third parties or other marketplaces, peer-to-peer or whatever else might go out into the market that will allow aggregation or other activity to provide those distributed energy resources into our central market platform. So I think what we are trying to, in the scope of what we're trying to do for DSO transition and opening markets, is providing that platform for neutral market facilitation. So I don't think there's a conflict of interest with what we're doing. I think what we're doing is the facilitation piece and making a market available for those services that wouldn't otherwise be available, and providing that in a more standardised platform for all. I don't know, Stuart, if you wanted to add to that at all.
No, I think the whole thing is about instead of the networks traditionally being a way of delivering energy from large power stations, it's literally just becoming a network for markets to operate over, for energy transfer, different arrangements. So we should really be kind of creating the, if you like, facilitating is in the title, facilitating all these new things, and that's what fundamentally DSO is.
Brilliant. Okay.
Okay, we've got another comment coming through there. So on rural representation, which you talked a bit about, it is important when considering true cost reflectivity as consequences longer term of high charges at the end of a wire may influence location and migration of businesses and therefore jobs communities. So it's making a broader point really that vulnerable customers may not be limited just to domestic users. So I think that's a good point, and thanks to Grant for that.
Yeah, I think that's an absolute fundamental point. The work we're doing is designing a platform to allow these markets to happen. Depending on what choices are made down the line in terms of markets and all the rest of it, there will be social impacts, there will be political impacts, which is why this whole project is not set up to decide on what market models. It's about enabling them and then allowing society, let's say, to decide what models they want to do. And in that, we need to understand the consequences on could you stifle economic development in a particular area? Could you promote it and all the rest of it? So this whole thing needs to move at some point into a politically informed debate about what sort of markets we want to have in the UK in the future. That's not the remit of this project per se, but it's part of the remit of this project to draw out some of these issues and start to look at what the options could be.
And to realise some of those wider societal benefits.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. 'Cause it's not all down, it's obviously upside and downside. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, we're a little bit ahead of time, but I think unless there are any further questions.
We tried to leave lots of opportunity and time for people to ask questions today.
Has left the meeting.
Oh,
here we go.
Here we go. So there's a question here really, which is again a good one. What will be the role for exploring new ideas and involving new system participants who fulfill roles that have not historically been needed and so do not yet exist? Making an observation really that the advisory group is made up of established players. So I think this is a good one.
Yeah, I think that's where the work packages you talk about that relate to trials and the stuff is, for example, right? If you look at there's a number of us who've got projects looking at energy efficiency, right? Now energy efficiency, as in communities playing a role in driving energy efficiency, can effectively provide value to the network. Now there's a player that's not involved in this discussion at all at the moment. Yeah? So where we are with these sort of things is trying them, understanding them, getting people engaged so they understand the implications of actually participating in these sort of things. And then ultimately the DSO model should allow things like energy efficiency to play a role in some of the needs of the network and the system overall. So that's just one example. There's lots of other examples. I think the trials is where all that engagement is happening, and it allows us to test it against the DSO models that we've derived.
Yeah, and if things like electric vehicles and vehicle-to-grid and all that storage resource that could be tapped into ends up being controlled by data aggregators rather than suppliers, we're agnostic to that. We would be looking for the services, not trying to pick who was going to provide those services, winners and losers.
Yeah. The only caveat to that is that it's our job to make sure that the unintended consequences. For example, if a market was to drive the demand in an area rapidly to the point where it starts to overload the network, it's our job to have mechanisms in place to deal with that conflict in a fair and transparent way, which is what the visibility and systems and all that. That's the only kind of key piece.
Yeah, I think a couple of observations on the advisory group is, it's not a closed shop. If we think we're missing a group of representatives, or if there's an element that we're not covering, then do drop us an email and let us know. For example, we've got a meeting, and again, it links into this new system participants. We've got a meeting this afternoon to talk to the investor community, who might have a better understanding of the type of new participants who are looking at the market. Now, it's difficult there's not a traditional sort of trade association where we can go out and get representatives from the investor community. But it is a key area where we'd like to tap into people's thinking on how we're not restricting innovation in the market, and where investors in services and storage and flexibility might be looking to deliver their cost-benefit case for investment. So the advisory group isn't a closed shop, and if we can find other participants to bring a view in, that would be great.
Okay, thanks. And a further question, is the project drawing on or feeding into international practice or experience, European Union or beyond? So anybody fancy? Yeah. Randolph, will you take that?
So the short answer is yes. When we were looking at our models, we did essentially do an international comparison, both within Europe but also beyond, with the US, particularly what's happening in California and New York, and also what was happening with the models they're proposing in Australia. And then going forward, we basically sit on the equivalent flexibility groups at both transmission and distribution level in Europe, and working with our European colleagues on that, not just from an association perspective, but also on specific projects, like, for example, the SmartNet project. So we're very much, feeding into those projects, but also taking the learnings from those projects and bringing them back here so that we don't double effort. We're also working with various other networks, particularly in Europe, around some of the market trials and some of the different platforms and technologies that they're using. So we're sitting with them and seeing how they could be applied here or tested here.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, just give another minute or so to allow people to type frantically.
Or two.
Okay, anybody want to come off mute and make a question verbally, or an observation? I think we still have the bulk of people dialed in, so thank you for your ongoing attention.
Alice Fourier-Bayes
has left the meeting.
Catherine Dodgson.
Okay, so we're hearing a few people leaving the meeting and seeing that on our links now. So I think we'll wrap up at this point, and I will just say thank you very much for your attention this morning, and thank you very much for a very good set of questions that hopefully we've answered or taken away actions for where we haven't been able to answer them today. And again, please encourage all of you to respond to our consultation by 23rd of February. So thank you all. We will close the webinar now and look forward to contact from you. Thank you.
Has left the meeting.
Cattle.
Has left the meeting.